How's it going, everybody? Noah from Stage 3 Motorsports here, and today I've got a more unusual video for you than what we normally post because our Bronco back here made a trip to the service department at our Ford dealership, and you can probably imagine where this is going because it wasn't for routine maintenance. So let's talk about it. Yeah, it broke already, and it was basically the first real substantial off-road trip we've taken it on, which is cause for concern. But in a shocking turn of events, this time it wasn't something that I broke or that my boss broke driving it. It decided to just break itself. So maybe the Bronco and the Wrangler have more in common than we initially thought. Just kidding. Obviously, I like the Wrangler and I still like the Bronco too. But real quick, if you are curious as to what exactly was replaced and you want to see the breakdown of the parts and the invoice and everything, I'll have some time codes down below in the description, and you can skip ahead to the video to find whatever info you want. But if you want to hear about what actually happened and how I encountered the problem, then obviously stick around. Here's the brief rundown on what happened. Basically, had the Bronco up in Sedona. We were shooting some footage out on trails to get a review on this truck with the Badlands package. And after a full day of trail runs, we were headed back to the hotel, and it was getting to be dusk, and we were on a pretty smooth, easy, just gravel or forest service road for the most part. So I had taken the truck back out of four-wheel drive. We didn't have lockers on or anything like that. And I noticed that it started wanting to lurch and accelerate, and it was giving itself throttle without me even touching the pedal. And if I hit the brakes, I could slow it back down. It wasn't fighting me, but there was definitely something going on. So the first thing I checked was to see if maybe I had accidentally bumped a button or a dial and activated the one pedal driving, or that something was going on in the background, but realized pretty quickly that that wasn't the issue and something else was going on. And it kept wanting to lurch and pull, so I figured it must be something electronic that was upsetting the truck. So I pulled it over, popped the hood, disconnected the battery for a couple minutes, and reconnected it, hoping that that would maybe reset the computer or give it a chance to straighten things out in the software. But it seems to have made it a lot more angry, because after that point, we immediately started getting error messages popping up on the dash, and I had a video showing the messages, and unfortunately I accidentally formatted over it, so I don't have that clip, but I'll try to pull up some different pictures of what we were seeing. So there was obviously the service AdvanceTrac message that was on there, but we also got a message for servicing the parking brake, which is no longer working, as well as an error for ABS. And the ABS light basically just stayed on permanently from that point and was completely disabled, so we didn't have anti-lock brakes at all. With that, every other traction control feature was disabled, and then almost anything else that was related to a sensor in the vehicle that wasn't just core powertrain management stuff was disabled. So front and rear locker stopped working, sway bar disconnect wasn't working, cruise control wasn't working. Everything pretty much shut down on us, and wasn't super thrilled, but it was still drivable. I didn't have any issues getting the truck back to the hotel. It just meant that we had to cut the trip short and take the truck back out later to get footage. So obviously, as soon as we got it back, I cleaned it up and took it to the dealership. And I'll throw a quick shout out in here to Surprise Ford in Arizona and Zach, who was the service manager I talked to. They were really easy to work with and didn't have any hassles getting the truck in, and he was pretty clear about what was going on. So great job there. The one thing I will say is that the truck was gone for a week. So in my case, this is a company vehicle, not a huge deal. I have my own truck to drive, so I wasn't too concerned about the Bronco having to stay there. But if your Bronco is your only vehicle and it's your daily, I could definitely see why this would become a huge issue for you and why people would be frustrated, because then you do have to find a ride afterwards. So thankfully for me, that wasn't as much of a problem. But once we got it back, I was able to get an invoice and kind of a breakdown of what was wrong. So I'm going to take you over and show you that right now. All right, so here's the invoice laid out on the bench, and I cut off the top section to protect the company's information, but everything you need to know is pretty much right here at the bottom and in the middle. Now, one of the things I'll point out right off the bat is that you'll see in totals, it's all zeros, which this was all done under warranty, and I'm really thankful for that. Like I said, it wasn't my personal vehicle, so I didn't have much to lose here, but it was nice to see that they stood behind the fact that this was an internal failure and not something that we caused, and it definitely was a weird one. So what had happened is that the rear axle bearing on the passenger side failed. So they call it the right side here, but passenger side is what it's referring to. So when that bearing failed, the race came apart. Obviously, it let some grease out, but that also damaged the tone ring, which in turn caused an issue with the speed sensor. And then because that bearing was bad, it also damaged the axle shaft itself. So you can kind of see what they had laid out for parts at the top. They replaced the whole axle shaft assembly, they replaced the hardware for it, and they replaced the sensor assembly. So they rebuilt the whole thing to get it working right. And I can say so far we've had no issues bringing it back. But what that is kind of referring to and why this created so many problems electronically is because that tone ring, once it was damaged, it started basically feeding incorrect information to the sensor, or the sensor read it incorrectly, because the ring itself is basically just a gear looking shape, and the sensor sees these pockets in it between each little tooth on that gear, and that's how it determines what the speed of the wheel is and whether or not it should be applying brakes and how to manage the traction control. So once there was an issue there, that was basically what lit everything up, and it couldn't be corrected, and that's why resetting it wasn't enough. And they even tried resetting it at first just to see if the issue reoccurred, and it definitely did. But with everything they've done here, it's all cleaned up. We have no issues, like I said. We'll see if anything happens down the road, and I don't know if this is a very common problem. I haven't heard of anybody else running into this exact issue, but I know that there are some other situations that have caused similar problems as far as seeing these error messages and getting the service AdvanceTrac error or getting that parking brake error. A quick side note, the Bronco seats are really comfortable, so I decided to move in here to sit down to keep talking just because it's a better place to sit. Like I was saying, there are some other issues that can trigger similar messages to what we were seeing in our Bronco that aren't necessarily tied to the rear axle or a bearing failure like that. So one of the things I saw on the forums is that in colder climates where you might be getting snow or ice or slush, that can cause damage to the wheel speed sensors, or it causes damage to the connectors where the harness meets them, something along those lines. I wasn't really concerned about that with our Bronco here because we're based in Phoenix, so we don't ever really see snow or ice unless we head up north, but we hadn't encountered any on this trip, so I knew that that wouldn't be the issue, but it might be something to check if you are in a colder climate. The other thing I saw, which is pretty dramatic, is that on some earlier Broncos, the wiring harness that runs over the drive shaft can actually disconnect, or the clip that holds it can break, and it'll drop down onto the drive shaft, and then while it's spinning, obviously the drive shaft can hook that and tear it apart or eat through it and, you know, rub through the insulation over time, causing all sorts of problems. So hopefully that's not the case for many people, and I would think that you'd probably get a lot more severe errors if something like that broke or if that harness got pulled, but that wasn't an issue here. Ours was still pinned up properly. So those are just some other things I ran into, but I'm sure that some of you guys out there have encountered other issues or might have some more information on this. So definitely drop a comment down below. Let me know your stories, or let me know if you guys have any info or have encountered similar problems on your Bronco. I think it'd be helpful. I'd like to read it, and it might be nice as a resource for other people that are stumbling upon this video trying to figure out what's going on with their truck. So definitely let me know what your guys' thoughts are and share some of that information down below, and I'll keep an eye on it. But as I said at the beginning of the video, I don't dislike the Bronco. I don't think that this means that it's a garbage platform or that we're gonna have issues the whole time. And we really didn't have any issues with our Black Diamond Bronco before this one. So I think it just comes with the territory of it being a new platform, and with as many electronics and sensors are tied into new vehicles these days, you're almost bound to encounter a weird one-off issue at one point or another. So hopefully this doesn't mean that there'll be more issues down the road, and I don't expect that we'll see a lot of problems for many, many miles with this truck. But if you guys enjoyed the video, definitely consider dropping a like on there. Let me know what you thought. And as always, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.